Welcome to the debate. When a building is on fire, our human biological instinct is to fight it. We want to act, to engage, to throw water on the flames, to, well, neutralize the threat.
Right, but meeting energy with energy against a fire that actively feeds on your response, that is a fast track to being completely consumed by it.
Exactly. And today we are decoding a highly discussed behavioral defense strategy called the gray rock method. But we're looking at it specifically against the hidden, predatory world of covert narcissism and narcissistic triangulation.
Yes, the invisible red flags, the profound emotional toll of just constantly walking on eggshells around these people.
Right. So the central question we're debating today is this. Is the gray rock method a highly effective, empowering behavioral tool to neutralize toxic individuals? Or
Is it a fundamentally flawed, psychologically damaging strategy that risks severe internal trauma and, honestly, actively escalates the abuse?
exactly. I'll be taking the position of the behavioral profiler today. My argument is that gray rocking is an essential, evidence-based strategy to starve manipulators of their emotional supply.
And I'll be approaching this from a trauma-informed perspective. I contend that the method is fundamentally flawed as a long-term solution because the psychological toll of that emotional suppression is just biologically unsustainable.
Let's just jump right into the mechanics of this, because we cannot evaluate the defense without understanding the weapon. And covert narcissists are a very specific type of weapon.
Oh, absolutely. They don't look like your stereotypical, loud, arrogant narcissist.
Right, exactly. They mask their grandiosity under this shy, introverted, or even severely depressed persona. They rely on extracting what we call narcissistic supply, which is attention, emotional reactivity, your distress, but they do it through subtle manipulation.
Wait, look at how they use pity, for example.
Yes, that is exactly what trips victims up.
Right, they play the ultimate victim. It's the deep sighs, the weaponized incompetence. The victim is left thinking, oh, they just need my help. But really, they are being drained.
Exactly. That's not depression, that's weaponized guilt. They outsource their fragile self-worth to you. And one of their most calculated mechanisms is triangulation. They bring a third party in, casually dropping a micro-insult about you in front of a friend or using the silent treatment to make you compete for their approval. They force you into the Cartman drama triangle.
The victim-persecutor-rescuer dynamic.
Right. And that is why gray rocking, becoming as uninteresting and emotionally flat as a gray rock, is a necessary tactical containment strategy. It's pure behavioral extinction. A rat presses a lever, gets no food, it stops pressing the lever. You give them a flat, one-word response, you break their dopamine reward cycle. You starve the predator.
Okay, but you are mapping this out purely as a behavioral equation. You're completely ignoring the physiological host executing that equation.
How so? It works.
It might provide temporary behavioral extinction of their tactics, sure, but it demands profound emotional suppression from the victim. Let's look at the polyvagal theory from our source material. The human nervous system is an evolutionary marvel, right? It's designed to protect us. When you chronically inhibit your emotional expression in the face of covert gaslighting. But you're not inhibiting, you're containing.
No, biologically, those feelings do not evaporate. You are essentially forcing your own biology into a dorsal vagal shutdown state. You are commanding your body to freeze, and doing that every single day, that encodes trauma directly into the nervous system. You are destroying the victim's reality from the inside out.
I think you are framing gray rocking as if the victim is simply internalizing the abuse and just, dying inside. That is a fundamental mischaracterization of the tool. It is not about feeling nothing. It is strategic.
It feels pretty terrible to the amygdala, though.
Well, let's go back to the Cartman drama triangle. The covert narcissist acts as the victim, trying to provoke you into being the persecutor, right?
Right. Gray rocking is just the refusal to step onto that stage. Think of it like a circuit breaker in an electrical grid. When a destructive power surge hits the system, like one of their passive-aggressive micro-insults, the circuit breaker trips. It goes dead on purpose to prevent the house from catching fire.
Okay, but
The house is still intact. The appliances still work. The breaker just stopped the malicious surge. How can you dismiss a proven behavioral circuit breaker just because it takes a little discipline to maintain?
I reject the analogy because the human nervous system is not a copper wire. You can't just flip a switch, block a surge, and expect the biological hardware to be completely fine. Let's look at the actual granular reality of what happens in the body.
Okay, walk me through it.
Imagine a listener sitting in a meeting. Their covert narcissistic boss is subtly triangulating them, casually praising a junior colleague while using weaponized incompetence to imply our listener's project is failing. Just completely invalidating their reality in front of the room.
Classic covert tactic.
Exactly. Instantly, the listener's sympathetic nervous system flares. The amygdala registers a severe social threat, cortisol and adrenaline dump into the bloodstream. The biological urge, the fight-or-flight response, is to speak up, defend their work, correct the record.
Which is exactly what the boss wants. They want you to look defensive and crazy.
Yes, but look at what happens when the listener forces the gray rock response instead. They swallow all that adrenaline. They force a flat one-word answer. To accomplish that outward flatness while internally flooded with stress hormones, the brain has to pull the evolutionary emergency brake.
The dorsal vagal state.
Exactly. The freeze response. In the wild, a mammal does this when fighting or fleeing is impossible. It plays dead. Doing this day after day doesn't just block a surge. It rewires the brain to associate authentic emotional expression with severe danger.
And this leads to gray rock generalization. The victim's brain structurally adapts to this freeze state, and soon they lose their emotional resonance in safe relationships too. They go flat with their spouse. They go flat with their kids. The circuit breaker rusts in the off position.
Okay, you are describing the ideal conditions for a healthy nervous system. But that completely ignores the reality of being trapped in rigid, unavoidable systems.
Unavoidable systems are exactly where it does the most damage. But what happens when the victim is economically bound to that job? Or legally bound by a court-mandated co-parenting agreement with a covert narcissist? Survival has to trump the ideal neurological state. In a system where no contact is impossible, gray rocking isn't a choice between healthy expression and trauma. It is literally the only viable shield.
A shield that paints a massive target on your back.
I completely challenge that premise. In a workplace, a covert narcissist uses triangulation to gather personal currency, right? They gossip, they play the victim, they recruit flying monkeys. If you react emotionally, you hand them the exact currency they need.
Well, true, you do give them a story.
Exactly. You give them a story to tell. By gray rocking, sticking to strict documentation, offering only brief, factual responses, you bankrupt them. Without your emotional reactions, they cannot effectively turn the office against you. There's no erratic behavior to point to.
You are assuming the narcissist simply accepts bankruptcy and walks away.
They eventually have to seek supply elsewhere.
They do not just walk away. And this brings us to a massive, terrifying flaw in the gray rock strategy. The extinction burst. You mentioned behavioral extinction earlier, the rat pressing the lever.
Yeah, it stops getting food, it stops pressing.
You left out the most crucial part of that mechanism. When the food stops coming, the rat doesn't just shrug and walk away. It frantically mashes the lever. It bites the lever. It attacks the cage. When a covert narcissist is suddenly denied the dopamine hit of your defensive reaction, they experience psychological withdrawal. They escalate violently.
Well, the extinction burst is a known variable. But isn't weathering a few weeks of escalated bad behavior worth dismantling their control?
It's not just bad behavior when they hold structural power. If a boss hits an extinction burst, they manufacture pretext for HR action. If you gray rock an abusive ex, they stop attacking you with the silent treatment and start aggressively triangulating your children to force a reaction. You haven't dismantled their control, you've just forced them to use heavier artillery.
But what is the alternative? Direct communication? Come on. We know from the clinical material that covert narcissists utilize splitting. You are either all good or all bad.
Right, they lack object constancy.
Exactly. When you assert a boundary, you become all bad. If you try to communicate openly or justify your feelings, You are trying to reason with a psychological structure incapable of synthesizing your perspective. You are pouring gasoline on a fire. The extinction burst is terrifying, yes, but enduring it through unyielding gray rocking is the only way to force them out of your life.
Enduring it requires a psychological toll that fundamentally alters the victim's identity, though. Let's look at schema therapy. When a victim gray rocks for years without an exit strategy, they develop a subjugation schema.
A core belief system.
Yes, formed through repetition. By constantly flattening their own reality to manage this person's pathology, the victim's brain hardwires the belief that their voice and their needs must be subjugated to survive. They internalize the abuser's dynamic.
But a subjugation schema implies the victim believes they deserve to be suppressed. Gray rocking is an active, conscious choice. The victim knows their reality is valid. They just choose not to share it with a predator.
The conscious mind might know that, but the body keeps the score. The amygdala doesn't know it's a clever tactic. It just knows you are perpetually suppressing a scream. This is why the material suggests transitioning to the warm but waterproof framework.
Ah, yes. Let's examine that. Warm but waterproof means remaining fully engaged and professional on the surface, maybe even smiling, while keeping your internal emotional world completely sealed off.
Precisely. It circumvents the extinction burst. By acting socially appropriate, you don't trigger their paranoia. You give them a smooth surface with nothing to grip, but you aren't shutting down your own social engagement system.
I look at warm but waterproof, and I see a strategy that requires an impossible amount of cognitive load.
How so?
You are asking a victim who is already exhausted by covert gaslighting to now perfectly calibrate a performance of pleasantry while guarding their psyche. That is why the blunt force mechanic of gray rocking remains superior. It stops the victim from engaging in the jade response.
Justifying, arguing, defending, and explaining.
Right. The natural human instinct when someone implies you're crazy to a third party is to jade. Every time you defend your parenting to a toxic ex, you signal your emotional investment. Gray rocking eliminates jade entirely. One factual sentence followed by silence.
But the internal pressure.
Yes, it requires somatic processing outside the interaction. The source material emphasizes journaling, therapy, physical discharge of stress. Those are the hidden infrastructure. Acknowledging a tool requires maintenance doesn't invalidate the tool itself.
It invalidates it as a long-term lifestyle. Look at the internal world of the narcissist during triangulation. They use the victim's psyche as a literal landfill for their own unmanageable toxic waste.
Which is exactly why you put up the absolute barrier of gray rocking.
But the barrier is porous because we are social primates. Human beings are wired for tribal inclusion. When your partner triangulates you, your nervous system registers a profound threat of tribal expulsion. Staying perfectly calm while absorbing the psychic offload of a disordered person, enduring that creates a trauma bond. You aren't safe. You are just quietly absorbing the radiation.
I view that exact same mechanism completely differently. Recognizing that the narcissist triangulation is just a desperate psychological defense is what makes gray rocking empowering.
Empowering?
Yes. When the victim understands the neuroscience, when they realize the smear campaign isn't about their flaws, but the narcissist's inability to manage their own shame, it depersonalizes the abuse. You aren't suppressing your reality. You are recognizing that the person across from you lacks the psychological equipment to perceive it. You wouldn't hand a beautiful painting to someone wearing a blindfold and then cry when they don't appreciate the brushstrokes.
But you also wouldn't stand in front of the blindfolded person every single day holding the painting perfectly still while they hit you with a stick, telling yourself you're winning because you aren't reacting to the stick.
What?
That is the danger of championing gray rocking without severe caveats. In a 5-minute child exchange, yes, it's vital, it stops the bleeding. But treating it as a viable long-term strategy is psychological malpractice. It's a tourniquet. It saves your life in an emergency. But if you leave it on for a year, the limb dies.
The literature is clear, though, that behavioral extinction requires rigorous consistency. If you take the tourniquet off too early, the manipulator learns they just have to push you a little harder. Gray rocking empowers the target to fundamentally rewrite the rules of engagement and dismantle the reality distortion field.
At the cost of their own nervous system.
Look, to summarize my position, gray rocking is a highly effective, necessary behavioral intervention. It empowers individuals to starve covert manipulators of their emotional supply, short-circuiting that deliberate coercive triangulation. When paired with external support, it is the most reliable tactical shield in an unavoidable system.
And my position remains that while it undeniably offers immediate behavioral protection, it is a psychologically costly strategy. By forcing the victim into chronic dorsal vagal shutdown, it risks deep trauma, the erosion of authentic identity, and provoking a dangerous extinction burst. We simply cannot solve a psychological attack by forcing the victim to sever their connection to their own humanity.
I think where both of these frameworks converge is the stark realization of just how complex and dangerous it is to navigate a relationship with a high-conflict personality. There is no cost-free way to interact with someone who uses covert triangulation to stabilize their own psyche.
There really isn't. Behavioral tactics provide necessary defenses, but you can't out-strategize the biological impacts of chronic social threat on your own. Discharging that trauma requires careful, professionally supported navigation.
It demands we view these tactics through two simultaneous lenses. The behavioral lens. How do I stop this person from extracting my energy right now? And the neurological lens. What is this containment strategy doing to my body over time?
And for those listening who rely on these tactics just to get through the week, there is so much more to explore in the source material regarding trauma processing, somatic regulation, and rebuilding your neural pathways after prolonged suppression.
Absolutely. We will end the debate here, leaving it to you, the listener, to weigh the protective power of behavioral extinction against the internal costs of emotional containment. Think back to that electrical grid. Tripping the circuit breaker might be the only way to save the house from burning down. But you have to ask yourself, once the threat finally passes, what will it take to flip the switch back on and allow the lights to shine again?